So all of these things, the social, cultural pressures, all of the things that we're tempted to as sinful creatures, wanting to navel gaze, as Keanu was talking about, depression, what about me? You know, what about my life? And here it is, this young man who was presented with death, and he could have been the first one to make an actual case that we all would have probably sympathized with, man, he's doing all this good. Why me? And all he did is saw it as a way to offer up suffering for the glory of God and salvation of souls. Welcome back to another episode of PPK. Back to our trio of brothers with the, I guess you guys have the same mother. Or the same Holy Mother, though. So, you know, I mean, it's all good. It's all good. Back for our Modern Saint series, right, Migs? This is something that we've obviously kicked off and started off with Blessed Pierre Giorgio Frassati.
Yeah.
And who are we going to today?
Well, you clicked on the video, so you already know. It's Blessed Carlo Acutis. We probably should have worked on that pronunciation harder, but according to EWTN, that's what they said. So we'll roll with that. Obviously, he's known as the Millennial Saint. Has been very popular recently. It's gotten us some good views there on Instagram. Blessed Carlo, shout out to him. Obviously known for being tech savvy and some of the other stuff. So we'll get into a little bit of his bio and his background, just kind of dive into his life, where it kind of resonated with us, and how much a 15-year-old could make you want to be better. That's for sure. Yeah. So he was born in London and raised in Milan. I believe the years of his life were actually 1991 and 2006. So only 1 year older than my sister, than Keani's and my sister. So pretty crazy stuff. It says that his parents weren't necessarily particularly religious, which is an interesting thing. And I guess upon receiving his first communion at the age of 7, he became a frequent communicant, making a point of praying before the tabernacle, before, after every mass. He was somebody that always looked up to sort of the younger saints as his models, right? We have Bernadette and Jacinta and Francisco Marto and Saint Dominic Savio as well. He was he was considered a computer geek, very savvy. He spent 4 years creating a website, so that's kind of one of his biggest things, is that if you even go on his, I think it's blessedcarloacutis.com, you can see how he made a humongous, I think 170 or 90 part series on Eucharistic miracles. Now it's in 17 languages, which has been done. It's been fulfilled more so by his mom and other people, but that was a big work that he was doing. And like I said, he died in 2006, so he's only 15, started making this entire website dedicated to Eucharistic miracles, which is pretty gnarly, because I can barely do Squarespace on my own, and this guy made that. So, yeah, I mean, he was one of the things that's so awesome about Blessed Carlo, right, is that if you see his tomb, he's in jeans, he's in sneakers, he has, a sweater. He looks like a lot of us. He played video games, enjoyed, comics. He watched a lot of the same movies, I'm sure. Well, I don't know. I don't know if he was watching White Chicks, but he watched, some of the same movies that we've all watched, I'm sure. He was diagnosed with leukemia, and that's when he really sort of had this very intentional I think it was maybe a few months of offering sort of sufferings for the intentions of Pope Benedict at the time and the entire church. And his mom said that he did that so that he could skip purgatory. So she believes that he did skip purgatory, which I'm sure he did. And then he's buried in Assisi, and there was obviously thousands of people that he affected that were there at his beatification. I believe it's Pope Francis who beatified him. So with all that, I mean, there's a lot of things we could get into. His liturgical feast is celebrated on October 12th, just so we have that as well. And I think we're just going to dive into some of his quotes, some of the powerful things he lived by, and see what it tastes like.
Yeah, I mean, the Eucharistic Miracle website that he created was actually the year before he actually died. So imagine doing what he did, given his diagnosis of leukemia. I think one of the things that resonates with me specifically, as somebody who's worked in technology for like 24 years now, which if you work in technology, obviously he was a geek, naturally gifted in that sense. And so that's a positive term, just so you guys know, if you're a geek in that sense, it's a positive term. So I'm affirming him in his computer geekness. But in the world of technology, it's very easy to find more commonly atheists, at best agnostic. And so to be able to leverage and use your gifts for the glory of God and the salvation of souls to bring about something like Eucharistic miracles, like this is a huge gift to the Holy Mother Church, which we have Eucharistic miracles up and down the centuries. Obviously, the most known one is our Lord coming in the presence of the Eucharist itself. And we've talked about that. But to be able to use those gifts at such a young age, and we're talking about, was it 2005 or 2006 that he died?
2006.
2006, right? So you're thinking about a time where you're 6 years removed from Y2K, where it wasn't really prominent from a .com perspective. Things weren't really easy, intuitive to use, and yet he used his gifts at such a young age. And I don't know. So one of the things that resonated is actually being Christ-like, Christ-centered, Christ-focused, and an evangelist in a time and in an area, technology, where it's kind of one of the most difficult, where people are very atheistic mindset, elitist mindset, more scientifically, even though we know faith and science exists harmoniously as well as, especially with science. So it's just like this, he's able to use those gifts. And I think it resonated with me definitely as somebody who's been a professional, who's made a living from a secular perspective in this field. And it's very difficult. It can be very lonely and very difficult. But I I'm going to start looking to Blessed Carlo as an inspiration and an intercessor, especially as I work in this field. Keone, what say you?
Well, just following up on what you were saying, for Blessed Carlo, like thinking about how technology can actually be a gift, and how in today's generation, you think of whether it be Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, just technology in general, it's really been deteriorating young minds in a lot of ways, whether it be making us more effeminate, making us be idle or static, right? We're wasting time scrolling, right? Or whatever. But the purpose that he used technology for was so, I mean, it's otherworldly to think about, like what he did. He dedicated his life to spreading, I mean, as one component, Eucharistic miracles, or whether it be Marian apparitions, whatever he was doing, creating these, over 100-part series on these things, so that 17 languages can actually, become exposed to the miracle within the Eucharist and how it's, touched lives throughout the world. And so just the beauty of technology, and even like in 2006, I can't even imagine like what he had to do in order to make this, right? And it was still kind of an up and coming thing. But just a reminder for us as youth, and, anyone watching, just being really purposeful in the use of technology and how we use it, and how it can often be a gift. And I think, if we really dive into our faith, we can see the technology as being worldly or secular because we've seen the downside and the detriment to society, but we can often forget that it can be used for a lot of good. And a lot of these things are morally neutral. It's just what we do with it. And the instruments that we provide using this medium that is technology. And he showed such a good example. But something I wanted to say that kind of resonated with me in my career is he talked about contemporary narcissism. And he said, true happiness comes from constantly turning your face unto God and your attention onto God. And whereas sadness is when we turn our attention to ourselves. And it reminds me of Father Ripperger, who's a little harsher. And when he says, he talks about people who come to him depressed or anxious, or especially with scrupulosity. He's like, you're not that important, right? Like, it's not just about you. And you think about it like a state of depression. It's the obsession of yourself, right? What's wrong with you? What could go better? Why everyone's out to get you, or like why you're not good enough, or why I'm no good, or I have no future, right? But it's me, 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 me. And it's no wonder why when you're separated from God, or your eyes can't even fathom the light, that you're stuck in a bunch of darkness. But just you hear it in Blessed Carlo, and just from a young mind, and something, and we can talk about, all the different areas as far as, daily communicant or going to mass as often as he did, or the chapel and what have you. But just like his eagerness to become better and to become more like God is like, wow. Like, I think about when I was 15, I was really eager to do my own thing and become more like Kobe Bryant, not like God himself. So just seeing this, and I hope young minds are able to resonate with him, because he really is, in a different way, a new model. And I pray that he does become a saint soon. But just having his intercession for us as youth, it can really transform the way we use these gifts, that is, like technology that God has given us for actual evangelization purposes. Like, we can change the world by what we can expose the world to if we show God's light.
Yeah, that's one of the things that stuck out to me a lot too. Obviously, the media side and what we do with World Blaze and PPK and all this kind of stuff, and something I've spoke about a lot in the past. And it just this idea of like, this guy had a 196 part series on Eucharistic miracles in 2005, basically, right? And like how absurd that is. And then now you look at what Catholics use it for, and it's not to where it could be. It's not at that level. And if we did strive for that level, how much more could we evangelize, right? I mean, we don't know how many people globally have been now, transformed by the presentation of Eucharistic miracles that people just don't see before. I mean, I know even for us, we did a little bit of a Marian apparition episode, and just read a few of those, and it can completely change your life, And imagine 196 now miracles for the Eucharist in a time where it's so obviously questioned and not believed anymore. But I think that's a really huge point. And I think the biggest thing when I look at someone who's 15 who has leukemia, right, your whole life, I mean, Kelly talked about it. For us at 15, it's like, dude, I just wanted to talk to girls and play basketball. If I realized I didn't have much life left, I mean, the amount of despair and just, I think, hopelessness that would be present in my life. But for him to say things like this quote, basically, every minute that passes is 1 minute less to become like God. I mean, wow, dude. For me, it's like every minute that passes is one less minute to, talk to girls or get buckets or something like that. That's how I was thinking. And then he says, what does it matter if you can win 1,000 battles if you cannot win against your own corrupt passions? The real battle is with ourselves. Which is, speaking of Father Ripker, that's a little Father Ripker-esque right there. Yeah. So I think that eternal perspective that he had at 15, because that's really what you need. I think for a lot of kids growing up, especially myself, the eternal perspective was knowledge-based. It wasn't love-based. It wasn't me understanding that when I do something against God, it hurts him. Someone who's, what is actual fear of the Lord? It's fear of disappointing my dad, like my earthly father. And I never, and I'm still trying to get that way, right? Like we had that thing about, what was it? Relationship struggles and that aspect. And it's the same sort of thing, like to have that eternal aspect in your heart, not just in your mind. That's something that stood out to me a lot, was for him to say, I don't know. It's just this, like, he's almost confused why people would just want to get after these worldly things, like why would that even matter? We have one goal here on earth, and that was it. It was like, when we talk about Mama mentality, that's the Mama mentality he had of like, what are you guys paying attention to all this other stuff for? We have one goal in mind, and that's so difficult to have. And obviously he was so blessed from a young age. I mean, I was listening to his mom speak, and his mom was saying that she almost looked at him as sort of this spiritual father, and that it wasn't so much her teaching, like he was the one that was teaching them. He started teaching catechism at the late age of 11. There were so many amazing things that this guy had done that he was obviously, I don't want to just say handpicked. We're all handpicked to be saints, but obviously God was working through his life at such a young age in a different way than a lot of us are. And his journey is different from a lot of ours. But man, I think if you could take anything back, it's almost like slow down in your life and remember what's really important. Remember where so all these, the bills or what Biden's doing and gas prices and all the things that we're worried about, right? Is like, what about that eternal aspect though? Like what really matters? What's that championship goal? What's that championship mindset?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, if you were to summarize that, what I was thinking about was, in the end, all that mattered to him was the end, right? Like that was so critical for him. I mean, as we were prepping with our show notes, you take a look at things like the Eucharistic amazement that he had. That whole dumbfounded, like he was baffled that you could have lines and stadiums full for soccer games and rock concerts, but then God, who we say lives among us in the tabernacle, nobody's there. And if you think about that, that's a gut check for all of us, where it's just like, wait a minute, if we believe in God, and if we believe as Catholics that his body, blood, soul, and divinity, the true presence is with us in the Eucharistic miracle of every day in the tabernacle, right? Not just the Eucharistic miracles. And yet how often, right? We complain, we gripe, we cry about a Sunday obligation, right? We all of these, and yet here's a young man, and I think you're talking about handpicked. You look at lives like this, and you go, if you knew you were going to die, what would you do? Would you spend the year before you died creating a website to expose as many people to Eucharistic miracles? No, most people would say, oh no, I'm going to go and I got my bucket list, right? I want to go do this. I want to spend time with family and all good things. But it's like, that's what he used his last breaths for, was to muster up keystrokes in order to not bring glory to his name, but to actually bring glory to God in the Eucharistic presence of God. And so I was just thinking, like, man, his life was so short. So you think about all the crazy things that he did because God wanted to do amazing things in his short life. And I think it's just like that reminder, like, to be in a Millennium Saint, right? I mean, and we didn't even talk about the fact that for those of you who didn't know, right, he's an incorruptible saint at the moment, right? So when they, exposed his body, and that his body was, integral, it didn't decompose like you would assume that it would after, years upon years of just death. It's just like, well, there's that. I mean, he's got so many things working through him. So I was very impressed with the fact that he just had that short life, but a fulfilling life, that in the end, all that mattered to him was the end, and he lived his life accordingly. So let's go back, because I want to talk about one of the things when you talk about it. I think by age 11, he was a catechist. And it was really, what thing that stuck out to me when we're reading about him was he tried to encourage and promote to these young minds sanctity. And he came up with what he called a holiness kit, which involved like these 9 steps that he himself practiced. So again, Keone, I think you were speaking about it from the beginning, where he talked about, love God with all your heart, each day go to mass. So his daily mass, it was, and receive communion. He talked about his devotion, praying the rosary, read a passage of sacred scripture, make a visit to Jesus in the tabernacle each day, go to confession once a week, to help others as often as you can. So that idea of charity, and to rely on your guardian angel as your best friend. This kid does more. If you told that to somebody today, an adult, a grown man or a grown woman, they'd be like, oh, that's too much, man. I just want to go to mass and do my thing, right? But you're talking about daily mass, daily communicant, weekly confession, reading scripture every day. Go figure, right? Like all of these things. And he's just like, no, this is what we need to do as far as your holiness kit. He was a kid teaching other kids how to be mature, faithful adults and disciples. Keone.
As you guys are both talking, I was thinking about the talks that you would give, Pops, when you would talk to confirmation youth, and how you often give the story of David, and how, as a way of sharing with the youth that you're never too young. Like David was, anywhere from 13 to 15 or whatever they say, but he was a youth, and how there was a conviction that he had. And an intentionality with even the small things he was doing, right? When he's defending his faith, and he's talking about his readiness to battle Goliath, he talks about how, when he was shepherding, like the battles he had to do versus the bears and the lions or what have you every day to uphold his duty, and how that was a preparation for this battle against, the beast that is Goliath. And so I think about Blessed Carlo, and how from the moment he was 7, from the moment he first received, he was preparing. And that was, going to mass frequently, seeing Jesus in the Eucharist. And that prepared him to spread his message, whether it be through the catechumens that he was sharing the faith with, or the people worldwide who get to watch his Eucharistic miracles, or the people who are able to see him at his burial service, or even people like us who just kind of heard him and be like, wow, that's a millennial saint. What? Like it prepared him to touch lives. And in his own way, he's almost like a David for us in our time right now, in that he's someone at such a young age who saw the world and had such a faith in God that was so different. It was a conviction that's like, wow, he's about it. And it's like, think about what God can do in our lives. I'm 26. What he did for this young man in 15 years, just simply by surrendering all. And I know it's not as simple as we like to think it is, but the recipe was there, and his 9 kit, holiness kit was like, it's right there if you want it, and like God actually working through our own charisms and our own gifts. But like, we often doubt, or we're like you said, Bob's like, I just want to go to mass on Sunday. But just seeing this 15-year-old kid, like what he was able to do in such a short span of life, and the conviction that he had, the intentionality, it's very David-esque for me, because you don't even factor in age when you're hearing his story. You're like, what you see is a man of courage, of zeal, of passion, of a real kind of grasping the moment, right? He talks about the urgency. Blessed Carlo is all about, like Meeks was saying, like every minute that goes by is a minute that I should be getting closer to God, or could be getting closer to God. Like oftentimes we spend a lot of moments kind of in purposeless leisure. And something that when you talked at the beginning, Meeks, about, he played video games, and he probably watched a lot of movies that we watch, or at least was exposed to things that we were exposed as youth in this day and age. But I probably need to do a little more research on it, but I would bet that even his leisure was purposeful. And I think that's something for me that I'm trying to do. It's not that leisure is wrong. And I know St. Thomas Aquinas talks about purposeful leisure and all that, but I think if you even look at Blessed Carlo's life and what he tried to do, and his perception of life as every moment is a moment to get closer to God, a chance to get closer to God. Well, if he's playing video games and he has that perception, what does that mean about when you are playing video games? Is it a purposeful 20 minutes to rejuvenate so I can get back to doing what I'm called to do and, continue my 196 part series? Is it, is it to grow in some sort of skill? Like, is it just mindless activity that he's avoiding a task? Right. And it's something to think about for us, because I know for me, there's times where I might want leisure, but I'll be like, no, you can't. You're wasting time. Right. But then there's also times where I beat myself into submission, and then I spend too much leisure time where I should be productive. And I think there's, as far as the virtue of temperance, it's in the balance and having leisure that is purposeful. Right. I'm going to watch a show with my wife, one, to grow closer, but to have a time where we just have presence with each other and enjoy something. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's the intentionality. Whereas, we're only watching a show because we don't really feel like cleaning the house, and we just got an argument, so we'd rather just kind of pass through and not talk to each other. Right. Like, just two very similar actions, if not identical, but very different intentions behind it. So that's something, as I'm reflecting more on his life, like if you see his perception, then you see what he was interested in. There was an intentionality behind it. I think we can really reflect on in our own life. Like, even when we're doing things that might seem mindless, basketball, working out, video games, even, or whatever, what is our intention behind that? And it can still be a way to go closer to God.
I like the surrendering thing a lot, because I was literally just going to say basically everything that you said. And, I was thinking, the spots where me and Blessed Carlo are alike. We were both 15 at one point. And we both use a computer. So yeah, other than that, but no, I was gonna say the surrendering thing is so important, because exactly what Kevin's saying. If we all just said yes in the way that Blessed Carlo said yes, then what could be accomplished in our lives, right? And I think that's like what in my short 22 years of life, it's like, just start saying yes more and more. It's been so reluctant, but I'm somebody who wants to plan so much. I mean, talk to my dad or my brother, you'll know that like everything's about like, okay, yeah, next year at this time I'm going to be here and here, or whatever it may be. And I'm getting really tired of it, to be honest, of trying to plan this and that. And it gets stressful, because it's like, dude, one, you don't know where you're going to be, but two, it's like, why even try? Just say yes to what's in front of you, right? Like, I don't know where World of Blaze is going to be. I don't know if anyone's going to buy this hat that you might be available. Like, who knows? I don't know if anyone cares. I don't know if anyone's going to buy this shirt that's going to be right here. I don't know those things, but all I can do, and the same way Blessed Carlo Acutis did, I don't think he was like, I'm going to do this 196 part series because 3 million people are going to see it, even though it's probably more than that. I don't think he did that. I think he said, I have a gift, and I know that I just want to use it to glorify God. And so I get so stuck in this mindset of like, okay, yeah, but maybe if World of Blaze doesn't work out, and I haven't eaten in 6 weeks, and then maybe I'll go get this. And it's like, who knows and who cares? Just go out and do what you're called to do at that moment. And so that's something that's big for me, is just start saying yes to more things and quit worrying about everything else. Just worry about saying the rosary, going to mass as much as you can, starting and ending your day with prayer, reading, a chapter a day. Start with those things, The rest of the stuff is gonna work out. I think that's maybe, you know, the biggest lesson we can learn from such a young person is like what happens in our lives when we say yes and we stop trying to control every little thing and we want to make the plans and I think I'm supposed to be doing this. Like it doesn't matter, you know. Like I remember there's a clip we just put on the Instagram of I think you should go home. I think it was Instagram Faith, and Keone was saying that we always make so much out of like how we want to worship God, but what does God have to say about that? You know, that was his line.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing. It's like we have so much that we want to say about what we want to make our lives, but what does God have to say about that? Yeah. Like who cares? Who cares about your, you know, it's funny. Nico, if Nico watched this one, he felt like I was attacking him when I mentioned passive income and stuff like that. But it's just because that's what we're beat into. Like that's what our generation says is a purposeful life, right? You're owning some property on the side. You're in crypto. You're in this and that. It's like, dude, it's all about us trying to make something out of our life. It's trying to get our bag. It's trying to be man-made. And it's like, where does that get you, dude? It's like, congrats. You make 6 figures and you live in LA or Miami. Awesome, dude. Like, and no one cares, bro. It doesn't matter. And that's the thing that like I got, you know, I try to do a sales job for a month and I'm just like, well, I mean, what are we doing here? You know? Cause it's like, what's on your heart and how are you going to make, you know, God better? Don't stop trying to listen to what society says. This is the blueprint towards happiness. It's just not going to work. So, I mean, that's the biggest thing for me is saying yes in the simple way that when leukemia was presented to him and he knew that he would die, he still said yes in that moment. It wasn't anything about how could this happen to me? It was where can I put my suffering, you know? And then I get ticked off in my Prius when I get cut off, dude. You know what I mean? It's like, geez. Well,
you know, like rounding this thing out, because I think what we're speaking to, where we talked about the holiness kit, and just reading about some of the things that he did. You know, he stuck up for kids that were bullied. He tutored kids that were struggling in school. He tried to slowly bring those friends back he knew that were either dabbling in drugs or pornography. You know, he would look for litter in the beaches and the park. I mean, you talk about everything this guy does, spiritual and corporal works of mercy. And the dude was 15, right? And I think like all of the things I just described, all of the things in his holiness kit has nothing to do with you know, like this huge accomplishment of Instagram followers or how many people recognize you when you walk in public as some Catholic celebrity, as if there is such a thing, right? Because if you're living that way, you're not really doing it right. So all of these things, the social, cultural pressures, all of the things that we're tempted to as sinful creatures, wanting to navel gaze, as Keone was talking about, depression, what about me? You know, what about my life? And here it is, this young man who was presented with death, and he could have been the first one to make an actual case that we all would have probably sympathized with, man, he's doing all this good. Why me? And all he did is saw it as a way to offer up suffering for the glory of God and salvation of souls. And so, I mean, for me, this learning about him, preparing, and I love the fact that we're doing this modern Saint series is because this gut checks me and shows me how far I am and how much more I need to go, but it inspires and motivates me because I want to be a saint too. And if this young man can do all of that by age 15, what do I got to say at being age 25? Just kidding. I got you right there, because that's weird, because Keone's 26, so be weird. Anyway, but you know, yeah, exactly. But he inspires and motivates me and it checks me, right? Because we could be pointing our fingers, and I'm guilty of this, at what everybody else isn't doing. And this is the part that I love about what we read about him when he talks about his love for the church and the saints. He says, if you criticize the church, we're criticizing ourselves. Don't judge the church by those who don't live by it, judge by those who do, right? Who live by the teachings. And I'm like, how often do we do that? We point to the shepherds, we point to this person. People may be pointing to us as you're not living out the faith. And it's like, dude, what are you doing to grow in holiness today? How about that? What are you doing to, you know, chip off some time in purgatory? Because that's going to stink and hurt when we get there, right? So I'm super motivated. I'm glad we're doing this Modern Saint series, and definitely will be adding Blessed Carlo to my intercessory prayers. Keone, what's your last parting words?
When Mika was talking about the whole passive income, and I think that's so big right now. Everyone's talking about, what are you investing in, right? How are you setting yourself up to be financially stable? Get out of the 9 to 5, right? All that stuff. And I'm reading a book called Parenting with Grace. Highly recommend for any young parents or parents in general, or anyone in general, but especially for young parents. And there's a part where they talk about burnout. as an idea of parent, but I think this can get into our life in general, our spiritual life. And the quote goes something along the lines of, when you do a bunch of tasks without meaning, it's going to lead to burnout. And he talks about the tasks that were given to Adam and Eve before the fall versus after the fall. And before the fall, it was supposed to be a source of joy, but after, it was a source of toil, the sweat of his brow, right? And just reminding us of what we were actually created for, and how I think Blessed Carlo really exemplifies the tasks he did were always oriented God first. And I always meditate whenever I'm doing the glorious mysteries and I'm thinking about the ascension, and like thinking about being in that place when Jesus ascended and being one of his apostles, and being like looking up in heaven, and the angel being like, what are you looking at? He's going to come back the same way he left, right? And just kind of thinking about like our eyes not only being like physically gazed, but like the work that we're doing is our eyes being gazed upon him. Like, it's like we look up and we know like we are going to look up at him by incorporating him into the day-to-day that we have. And that's actually what decreases burnout. Instead of having to feel like you always have to be doing something. Miko was talking about planning ahead. And that's what it becomes, right? What are you going to invest in now? How are you going to grow your income? How are you going to do this and that? And it's being present and saying, this is the task, this is the charism that I have, and I'm going to use it towards this task to glorify God. And that's my yes right now. And God's going to continue to bless it, and I'm going to continue to respond to that blessing. And it's just like this never-ending relationship that actually fosters true growth. And that's the path to holiness, to sanctity. Instead of, like Miko saying, how can I like man make this glory or kingdom financially or powerfully or through influence, right? And social media or whatever the case might be. For me, that was just huge in the intentionality that you can do something, even small things. The book that I was reading, Parenting with Grace, talks about consecrating every action as a parent, whether that be to your spouse or to your child, or even in a task that you're doing, consecrating it for the glory of God so that you can love those around you and yourself more orderly. And so that's my thing, is I think Blessed Carlo really exemplified that idea of intentionality, and it's no wonder why he didn't burn out, because he was so filled with joy. Like, obviously you think about coming up with a 196 part series, and that was only one of the series that he did. Like, he could have easily said, oh dude, this is too much. In 2006, I can imagine he can easily have been like, dude, this is way too much to do. But there was meaning behind the task. And it shows the zeal behind it. And that's something that whatever task that we're finding ourselves in right now, what is the meaning behind it? Because if we have no meaning, if it's just for selfish reasons or disorderly reasons, there's going to be burnout, or there's going to be stress, or there's going to be us being irritable, or what have you. And so just checking ourselves, like you said, Pops, it's a huge gut check, just reflecting on his life.
Yeah, I was going to say, we just recently went to Michael Jr., who's a Christian comedian. But he had made it was a very interesting show. I wouldn't call it too much of a comedy show, but we got a little therapy action and all that. But he had a really good quote. I'm going to butcher, but it was something along the lines of like, God brings people or situations in your life that challenges you in areas that you're not free, right? So he puts these people or some things in your life, and it's going to rub you the wrong way because it's an area that you're not yet free in, which I thought was super powerful and pretty crazy here for a comedian. But I that's what I kind of sit and I look at in my life, and that area that he was presented with, which is leukemia, that opportunity. He presented it and he was still free in that moment, And I think, how many times am I presented with so many opportunities that I'm not yet free from? I'm so irritated, I'm so ticked off that I can't do this or that. Or the simple fact that I'm just addicted to continually doing what I want, distracting myself. Just those little things, I'm not free from those things yet. And so that's such a big thing that I'm thinking of, because, I think it's a common thing that people always say, but like, God's not necessarily just going to give you patience. He's going to give you opportunities for patience, right? Or purity, or opportunities for purity, or chastity, things like that. And I think it's just a switch of mindset when I think about Blessed Carlo, is that we didn't necessarily go through different things. I think he went through all the temptations that I went through. You know what I mean? He put on jeans just like I put on jeans, or sneakers and all that kind of stuff. He's 15 just like I was 15. But he had a whole different attitude on how he approached every little thing. And like, that's the difference between we're big basketball guys here, and that's the difference between the Kobe's of the world and everybody else? How are you approaching today in practice? You know, is this 6 a.m. workout just, oh my gosh, just so hard? Or is this an opportunity to be better than everybody else because they're not awake yet? Those are two different mindsets, but that can completely change your life and completely change how you even play the game. There's a lot of people who are talented, right? There's a lot of people who are good people even, and we can go through all this different analogies, but I think the mindset is so huge. And it's not necessarily David Goggins' mindset or a Jocko Willink mindset, but it's the mindset of saints, and that's what we should be striving for.
Amen. I mean, I do think that Blessed Carlo did exemplify, sanctification made present in everyday life. And I do resonate with the, being free. But you know what's not free, Makes? Hats and shirts, Makes.
Hats and shirts are not free.
They're not
free to make. You're not getting them for free.
I'm pretty sure if Blessed Carlo was alive today, he'd be vibing out on some of the swag we got going.
Actually, that was weird. He actually said, I was actually going to, wait, right here, let me see it. Let me read it real quick. I have a 156-part series on PPK podcast. Yeah, he actually was going to do a 156-part series on the World Blaze YouTube channel. He said it was going to be called Priest, Prophet, King, and he couldn't do it. But yeah, he wanted to leave it to us. He said, he's like, I'm looking for kind of some more browner guys with dark hair to carry on the thing. And it's crazy because it's us right here. So just listen to him, dude.
Yeah. So you want to be able to, check out what we got going on here at World of Blaze, PPK. We're kind of premiering a little bit here, right? Some swag that's coming out. PPK hats, Stroud tees, all for the glory of God, all for the salvation of souls. Continue to learn about the modern day saints that we are bringing to you. Let us know what you want to see, what you want to hear. Keep praying for us as we continue to pray for you. And you know how we do it, just like Blessed Carlo does it. Let's get holy or die trying. God's peace.